oftentimes doing research on artifacts or historical events, it's not as easy as it may seem. Uh, Sometimes, when I'm lucky, it only take but a couple of hours to do some research online before you come up with some answers. But other times, it can take several hours looking through the internet, books, and it can take several days or even weeks to really truly come up with the proper information to connect the pieces of a puzzle to tell the proper story. And case in point, is this brick right here next to me, and several other bricks that I obtained from Depot and Second Street in the eastern part of Logan, which is a city in Hocking County. Uh, there are no records of these bricks when these were put down at Depot and Second Street on that corner exist in Logan, and if they do, they're in one of, I've been told, several boxes, which could be in one of a few places within the town. So without looking for something that may or may not even exist still, and essentially a one needle in a giant haystack, I went out and did some research and have come to the conclusion that this brick was made somewhere between 1893 and January of 1905, possibly maybe a little bit later, but I believe prior to 1903. And I'll get to that here in just a moment, why I think that. And this was a Hayden family from Mr. Peter Hayden of Haydenville, his family's patents. So that's what I'm able to conclude anyway. And where I began was looking at 1876 plat maps of Logan and the eastern part of Logan, or what would become the eastern part, because these 1876 maps show that while Depot and Second Streets were mapped and were actually part of town, there was nothing there. There were no structures, there were no homes at that time. So that was built, they were constructed, and the lots were there, but nobody had moved in yet. It appears that maybe in the late 1880s into the 1890s is when this part of town began to grow up. And this coincides with the Hayden family moving into Logan, to where Logan Clay is now and has been. And when Mr. Hayden died in 1888, his family and his investors took over his holdings and his companies, and in 1890 formed the Hocking Clay Manufacturing Company, which ultimately began production in Logan in 1893. And they kept a separate company for their Haydenville operations, but this was the specific company that ran out of Logan. And they have the advertising that I was able to find where these were actually being advertised as encaustic sidewalk paving brick, as it's officially called, was being made. And from what I can tell is, as this business expanded, so did the amount of bricks that they produced, of course, which makes good sense. Also, while no official operation to lay bricks and pave sidewalks was put in place until September of 1903, as I found in a newspaper clipping of that month and year, which mentions that the village council passed a resolution, stating that all sidewalks that are already paved, indicating that some were already paved as of 1903, that were in the village will be construction will begin immediately and will be done with 3 inches of sand being put down as a foundation before the bricks are put in place. Now, going back to the 1890s, prior to this, I found multiple occasions mentioned in these Hocking County newspapers that said that bricks were being laid and paved, or the sidewalks were being paved, but they were done with private investment. So citizens who had some money were paving these sidewalks and street corners, yes, for the benefit of the village and the community, but also doing them because maybe they walked them or their spouses walked to friends' houses, and in order to keep out of the mud and dirt, it was just a better way of walking and getting around. Obviously, this would be better to walk upon than dirt or mud when it rains. So it seems that this was put in place prior to 1903 in that September resolution that the council passed, because when I dug some of these up, underneath at the foundation level of the sidewalk, there was no sand left. And yes, the sand could have been washed away, but these were very tightly packed in, and underneath there was a very thin layer of like between the brick and the soil of dark brown to black colored, almost like filth. And it reminded me of pictures that and stories I had heard from people that said that sidewalks prior to them being paved were very hard packed and dirty, pretty much just dirt, that where people would throw things down or things would be rotting, for like leaves would rot and be pressed into the ground, so they would turn as dark brown to black substances. Things would rot on top of them. So that made good sense for what I was finding underneath, with obviously no bit of sand whatsoever in anywhere I could find in a relatively large stretch of the sidewalk foundation. So this indicates to me that probably these bricks were laid sometime after the company began in 1893 and prior to the village resolution of September of 1903. So with somewhere within that roughly 10-year span, these were put down. And unfortunately, because in all the newspapers, hours upon hours that I tried to do this research, I couldn't find anything on Depot and 2nd Street exactly. There were other streets within the village that were mentioned, or what is now the city of Logan, but not this one. So I can't pinpoint it, but we do know that these were exclusive patents at that time to the Hayden family and to the company. And they seem to be after January 1905, when the business closed or was sold actually to some Akron investors and it became Logan Clay. They would have made these for a brief time before, it seems, somewhere in the 19-teens, they sold the patents away to a company down in Nelsonville who manufactured these for some years after. So just because you see these doesn't necessarily mean that they are from Nelsonville or from Logan. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint unless we can find exact information. But all signs that I found point to these bricks being laid and manufactured in Logan, which is another point in closing I do want to point out, is that I found a few times in these 1890s newspapers and the early 1900s, they mentioned that, as it had been the case, Logan bricks would be used to pave the sidewalks whenever possible within the community. Now that didn't go for the roads per se, because those they would find and kind of shop around for different clay brick paving manufacturers to try and find the best deal for the best quality of product. So combining all of this, I believe I can safely say that these are from again 1893 to 1903, and that the Hayden family was operating their business in Logan during just that brief 10-year period, but they made quite an impact on the streets and sidewalks of Logan as people would travel all over town.